Starting. Are we back? Okay. Well, we're back. Technical difficulties. My feed just dropped out. I don't know why. I'm hoping y'all are still here. Anyone still here? Steve's back. Yay. Hi, Steven. So I don't know if that means everybody just comes back or you have to do something. Did you have to click back in or did it just come back up again? Frustrating. Imperfect technology. Yay, Maria's back too. Did you have to click it again or did it just come back? Hold on. I feel like there's an answer here, which is very exciting. Clicked back on. Okay. Well, hopefully people will think to do that. But bear with me. Panic. Tips for panic. Is that what you say? Sets in. Okay. So I think that one of the challenges about panic is that it comes and goes and you can't control it. So under normal circumstances, I would work with you to figure out what the panic is speaking to, why, what's going on, all the rest of that. So in this scenario, there's no confusion as to why people are panicking. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Stephen. I saw that to click back on. Amazing. Okay. So what I'm also finding is that a lot of people want, or I'm talking to a lot of people, clients and other people who want sort of the silver bullet as to how we manage all this stuff. And then you do a lot of reading, if you do a lot of reading, and it's all about like start an exercise regimen and, change your life or learn a hobby or whatever, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I personally, I'm not the only one, but I definitely ascribe to the school of thought that is actually not true. I don't think that is probably better for most of us. I think that for most of us, just getting through the day-to-day with the incredible uncertainty is what we have to focus on. So in terms of panic, different things. So Maria, when you say panic, are you talking about like the physical experience of panic where you feel like your head's exploding and you're about to freak out? Is it that, or is it when you lie awake at night worrying about stuff and you're thinking about all the eventualities and contingencies and powerlessness and all the rest of it? Which way would you go with that? Because I think that for a lot of us, panic has a very physical element to it. And one of the best things you can do for that, first of all, and this applies across the board. So this, I think, will answer a panic situation for sure, but it's also more broadly applicable than that. It's also great when you're talking about anxiety. So any of that restless energy where you feel like you need to get up and move, that kind of idea. Overwhelmed with one of the aspects you spoke about earlier. Okay, absolutely. So first of all, one of the challenges I think that we're finding is that so many of us are either living in the future, I think more so than under normal circumstances. Often we're in the past as well. Right now, most of us are in the future. One of the best things you can do for yourself is come back to the present, right? So we can talk about how we don't have control over all of these different things. All of that is true. Physical manifestation. And hi, Robin. Thank you. So come back to your body. So the kind of psychotherapy that I practice is Gestalt psychotherapy. And there's a real emphasis on physical body awareness. And so that kind of thing is great for panic. So something as simple as breathing. Taking a moment, we're all running around like crazy or we're running in circles, sort of feels the same, I think. So something as simple as breathing, something as simple as finding the supports that are available to you. And I don't mean like go have a bubble bath or go run a marathon or whatever else, or drink a bottle of wine. I'm not saying that, but as simple as, what are you doing to get yourself through the day? So for example, I was a little nervous about this Facebook Live thing. I've never done it before. I don't know how the technology really works, whatever. So this is a minor sense of anxiety, right? So what do I have to do to be here with you? If I start to feel nervous and anxious, which is sort of the precursor to panic, I can focus on feeling myself sitting on my chair, right? Something as simple as that, feeling yourself, getting back to that sense of groundedness, right? So doing a physical inventory of where you are. So if you've got 2 minutes, sit with your eyes closed and think about your body, right? Like check in with yourself, check in with your body. Something as simple as, how are my shoulders? When I'm tense, my shoulders are way up, right? How do I feel? How am I breathing? Is it working at all? Am I breathing shallowly? Bringing your attention to those sorts of things, those different areas in your body, can slow you down, which is helpful. That sort of interrupts the panic reaction, but it also keeps you in the present. And staying in the present definitely takes some of that pressure off when panic and anxiety start to rise. Does that make sense, Andrew? Does that answer part of your question anyway, Maria? Oh, hey, Daintree's here. Hello, Daintree. Nice to see you. The other thing that I think can't be underestimated is, everybody's telling us that we need to have like rock hard abs by the end of it or whatever else. And for those of you who do, amazing. Well done. I do not. And I find that I am feeling a sense of pressure to like start running again and do this and make the most of the time and all the rest of that. I think one of the things that really is important, though, is this aspect that we're talking about. Yay, Maria. Talking about self-care. And self-care is not necessarily running a marathon. It might be for the odd person. And if it is, then great. But I'm talking about go outside. And I know they're saying you need to stay in your house. And I'm not saying we should flout social distancing rules or laws or whatever. I'm not saying that. But when I say like get some exercise, I literally mean walk around the block. Or if you're lucky enough to have a patio or a terrace or a balcony, sit in the sun, if there is any, for 3 minutes. Just be outside, go outside, breathe the air. These sound like really simple things, but I think that when we get really overwhelmed and anxious and we're worried about paying our rent next month, or we're worried about our kids not being in school and are they going to miss the end of the school year and what is that going to look like, we forget those small things. Stephen, I've been having a hard time dealing with the death of a friend a couple months ago because I'm home all the time without the business of life to distract me. Any tips on coping with loss exacerbated by all that's happening? Yeah. Absolutely. And Stephen, you've hit on something that I think is coming up for a lot of people. I literally was just having a conversation with a colleague half an hour before this call. People are surprised. All the stuff that keeps us super distracted keeps us from sort of sinking down into those things, right? And so much of the distraction of our life has been taken away at this point that it's coming up. So there are different answers to this question, to be honest. It is a little bit complicated. So from a Gestalt perspective, what I do with clients is I look at the sort of coping mechanisms that people have always had. So most of us develop these coping mechanisms in our like early childhood, right? And we use those things to keep ourselves safe and supported through our childhood, through environments that are potentially not that supportive for us. And they keep us alive and they keep us safe in a way. And then as we become adults, those coping mechanisms, we call them creative adaptations, become so rigid that they actually get in the way of our lives and our flexibility when it comes to responding to certain things, to responding to crisis or different experiences, that kind of thing. So under normal circumstances, I work with people to kind of dismantle those a little bit, or at least if you think of it as being like armor that we've developed for ourselves to keep ourselves safe, we work on ways to have them kind of like let it down, right? So like put it down, if that makes any sense. So distractions are a great example of that. Now, if somebody comes to me and wants to do therapy work, but they're actually in crisis, what I actually say to them is that the way I can work with people, whether you're in crisis or it's your normal life, it's different. So when somebody's in crisis, it's irresponsible, I think, and potentially unethical to teach them to get rid of those supports because that's when they need them. Is this making sense? I hope it is. So despite what you might be doing in your life under normal circumstances, right now we are collectively in crisis. So Stephen, to your point, what are the things that have been supportive for you in the past? And if you can find some of those things, I would say go back to what you've done. You probably have ways to keep yourself safe. So for example, and they're not necessarily things that you think of right away, and they're not good or bad, right? I mean, like I said, for some people, it's going for a run. For other people, it's drinking a bottle of wine. For some people, it's taking time out. And that could be as simple as you're in a conversation with someone, you're feeling overwhelmed, so you daydream for a second. Like you literally just go away. Finding space for yourself. So when I'm feeling anxious, and I was doing this on the weekend, I sat outside in the sun, which was nice. I was reading a book and I was also listening to like 90s punk music as loud as I could, realistically do it without having my neighbors complain. For me, noise is supportive. It drowns out some of those thoughts. I was talking to a friend earlier, and she wants the opposite. She wants absolute solitude, silence. She walks around her house with earplugs in so that she's totally like insulated from the world. I think that the responses are very unique, but this is the time to rely on those things that have always kind of worked for you. Is that helpful, Stephen? Do you get where I'm coming from? Like, does that make sense? The grief that you're feeling, I think, around the loss of your friend, this might not be the time to deal with it. I suspect that there is so much other stuff going on right now that this isn't the time to really like get in there and start, doing the hard work. Let's get through this absolute crisis first. And then if you came to me in 4 months or whatever and said, hey, this is the situation, what do I do? There would be different ways. I would have different tips and suggestions for you. But I think right now we need to all be really aware of what resources we have available. And we're kind of husbanding our resources right now, I think, if that makes sense. Another way to look at it is the idea that we're all running a marathon. And so we're trying to figure out what our pacing is, but we don't know how long the marathon is. So it's super difficult. We don't know how fast we're supposed to go because we don't know how long we're going to be running. So I would say, just be kind to yourself. Yeah, conserve your energy, I think, if that makes any sense. Back to a question from Robin. I have an incredibly social little guy. He's lovely. And it's been really hard to help him navigate this. He's tried to do FaceTime with his friends, but is still in that age range where chats aren't really his thing. I know I'm not the only parent of someone his age. It's been really hard to keep patient as the demands are so huge. Okay, absolutely. So I've talked to a lot of parents, especially parents of little kids, because depending on the age of your kids, you're going to be facing different things, obviously, right? But I happen to know that Robin's little guy is 8, which is a pretty interesting age, and it's pretty energetic, and social interaction is super important, all of that. What I'm hearing from parents is that they're feeling really stuck trying to do everything, right? Most of them are now working from home, which either they haven't done before or didn't think it was possible or whatever. Kids are not in school. So now there's the sense that, oh my God, I have to be there. I have to be the teacher for the student as well, or for my child as well. A lot of us feel the pressure to impose a kind of structure that kind of mirrors where we were before to, keep it all going steady, that kind of idea. And I think that the best advice I can give you is relax. And I don't just mean relax yourself. I mean, relax your expectations. It's not going to be the same as it was before. And that's okay, because there is nothing normal about the time that we're living in right now. It's not the same. So trying to make it the same is not going to help you. And I know that kids need structure. I think in general, most of them do. And I think that we rely on kids' resilience as well. But at the same time, I think what kids need most right now is a sense of safety and security. And if as a parent, you're completely stressed out because you're running in 17 different directions and you're trying to get everything done, you can't focus on that. I was on one of the radio things, this question came up or whatever recently. And I still like the analogy, like the whole, you're on a plane, when we could be on planes back in the day, and the oxygen mask falls from the sky and you put it on your face first before you help those around you. It's kind of goofy, but it's the same analogy. I think as a parent, we need to relax our expectations of this time. And that means, to a certain extent, relax our expectations of our kids, what their behavior might be. This is a hard time for them as well. But if you can be available to them from the perspective of just like being their parent first, supporting them, loving them, being there, even just being there, even in an imperfect way, someone who's 8, that's old enough to talk to your son and say, listen, I am as confused as you. I am having a hard time as well. Like, be honest with them, not all the details necessarily, but be present and be authentic. And I think that will be supportive and will make it a little bit easier as a parent. Robin, does that answer, or does that give you some stuff to think about anyway? And Ildiko, I think. Very cool name. I'm listening to finances and loneliness are making me panic. Yes, totally. I think we can all relate to that. I try to play lots of happy music, or when too much, switch to classical music or meditation. Absolutely true. And this, I think, goes back to one of the questions that Stephen asked. It's really unique. Like, it's really depending on who you are and what works for you. And if we take a second to think about it, we probably all know, right? If you made me listen to rap music right now, I'd probably lose my mind. But Green Day does it for me. So, whatever works. Stick to a routine, wake up at the same time. Okay, this is a tricky one. Yeah. And you know what? Again, I think if it works for people, then do it. Although the caveat that I would suggest is to keep it as dynamic as possible. What's happening now is so different from what was happening 2 weeks ago, even, which was so different from what was happening in the so-called normal life, right? So I think that putting some structure or some controls around your life day to day, I think it can be super helpful. But like I said, I would suggest keep it as flexible as you can so that you give yourself enough room and space, I guess, to adjust when circumstances adjust, because they will. And if you're able to sort of flow with it, and that's what I mean by dynamic, I think it can be really helpful. Okay, I said one caveat, but I guess there are two, because the other one would be don't put pressure on yourself to maintain, right? Like even day to day, if it feels good for you, do it. But you might wake up one day and you're like, you know what? It doesn't feel good. I don't want to do it. It's actually adding pressure or stress. Give yourself the space to make that decision, would be my suggestion. Like I said, this is a weird moment out of time, I guess. This is not what it's going to be like forever. It's like a prolonged crisis. So what works now is not necessarily the way you're going to want to do things moving forward, but let's not worry about that because right now we're here. I hope that's helpful. And then loneliness. Oh my gosh. Huge, huge. I was actually having a call with a very young friend of mine who is 8 years old, and lovely, lovely child who is always very well behaved, actually. But in this moment, was kind of freaking out. And I was talking to his mom, who was kind of like glassy eyed and, oh my gosh, right? And the kid was throwing a tantrum. And the thing is, he went away and she was wonderful with him, but he went away. And I said to her, listen, the way he is behaving is the way I feel. I feel like a child. I want to stomp my feet. I'm super frustrated. I'm bored, but I don't really want to do anything. It's that feeling of when you're a kid and not in control of anything at all. And I think that for those of us who identify as being kind of extroverted, I think it might be harder. I don't know. I don't know that to be true for sure, but I know that I am handling it differently than some of my friends who are a little more introverted and seem to have a handle on that a little bit more. So what do you do about the loneliness? I don't think, well, that's not true. I know that there is no alternative to being able to give somebody you love a hug, right? I mean, simple, amazing. We can't do that. So that being said, I did have a Zoom party with my brother and some friends a couple of weeks ago, and it was amazing. So we had people on the Zoom, is that how you say it? But anyway, from Arizona to British Columbia to New Brunswick to Alberta, like everywhere, all sorts of different people who'd never met before, people who met for the first time on Zoom. And it was pretty amazing, actually. Obviously, I would have rather have been with them all together, but it wasn't possible. So this was an alternative. And it was something that, despite all of us knowing about the technology, had never occurred to any of us before this whole pandemic. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there's good stuff about the pandemic, because I don't think that's true. But we do have options, and we have options that we just need to use, right? So I have another friend, and we've been doing check-ins nearly every day. I have another friend who did like a sort of potluck Easter dinner, right? With a whole bunch of friends, and they all did their own thing, but they were all on screen. Like I said, this is it's not an answer, or it's not a replacement, certainly, for being with the people that you love, but at least it's an option. It's all free. Everybody can do it. You guys are doing it now with me in terms of Facebook Live, which is awesome. So those are the practical things, I guess, that we can do. And then the other thing is we can give ourselves a break, because of course we're lonely, because it's super weird, right? I mean, we're not meant to be isolated. I don't think we're not meant to be isolated in our little houses. So I think the idea of acknowledging the sense of loneliness, acknowledging how hard it is, acknowledging how much it sucks. And if you have to throw a bit of a tantrum, do it. It's totally, I think it makes sense. So I'm not being facetious. I think really, there's one thing about trying to be positive, trying to be optimistic, trying to see our way through. That's great. But I think we also need to take a break and just acknowledge and honor the fact that this is really hard. It's really hard for everyone. We all respond in different ways, but I think across the board, we can agree that it's really hard. I hope that was helpful. And we have a comment from Susan, or a question. As a grandparent, I find it hard, not so much right now because everyone in the family is self-isolating. But when they start to go back to school, and I feel like we still won't be able to see them, and I don't know how to do this for maybe a year. Yeah, Yes. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And, we've sort of touched on this as well. I think for a lot of us, the uncertainty is one of the things that's hardest. And I was talking about this with somebody else recently. The idea, I think, put some thought into this actually, that speaking of uncertainty, none of us has been, at least nobody that I know, has been in a global pandemic before. So it's a different and unique experience. But it is a crisis. And even though it's a different crisis, most of us have experienced some kind of crisis in our lives previous to this. And so when we were experiencing that crisis, on one hand, we learned tools and skills probably to get through it, whether it was something that happened in your childhood or last year or whatever it was. And so we're able to bring, and I was saying this to Stephen, we're able to bring these tools to our current situation, and it's helping us kind of get through a little bit. But the other thing is that depending on what the crisis was and how you experienced it, there might be aspects of this experience now that kind of activate what's going on. So for example, I have a client who grew up with a really abusive mother. And she had to learn to sort of self-isolate within her home. This is as early as when she was 6, 7, 8 years old, right? So she became completely self-reliant. She didn't have any adults around to help her. She had to figure it out on her own. So long story short, and fast forward a number of years, she's incredibly successful. She's a wonderful person. She's got loving relationships. She's got her life together, so to speak. This time has become incredibly difficult for her. And we were talking the other day, and the thing is, for whatever reason, and it's clear, because of the similarities of how it feels to her, she feels like she's 6 years old again, right? Where there's no safety and there's no security and there's total uncertainty, and she's not making the rules are anyway. And that's what this pandemic feels like to her. So we were talking about, her response to it, and she feels like her response is bigger than other people's. And in some ways it might be, because there is so much similarity to what's going on for her in the way it feels now. That, you've got the pandemic on the top, which is terrible for everyone, but then there's that underlying layer that may be affecting you more than maybe somebody else based on experiences you've had in the past. Does that make sense? And I think, Susan, back to your comment or question or whichever comment, I guess. I think uncertainty has that quality for a lot of us. A lot of us experience that growing up or as a young adult or whatever else, the sense of uncertainty, not feeling in control, not having control over our own lives, not feeling autonomous. And I think that this time is really kind of touching that off for people. So how are we doing? I love that you guys are hanging in. Thank you very much. This is really fun. Although I'm wondering if, moving forward, I should do via Zoom so people can actually talk, because that would be kind of cool too. But here we go. Stephen. Ooh, good question. What do you think about using this time to reinvent yourself, change your career, end your relationship, move? Is this a good time or bad time to think about that? All right. Well, this is what I think. Oh, thanks, Daintree. I think it might be a good time to think about it, but I think it's a terrible time to act on it. I've never been in AA, but I know about AA, and I'm not suggesting this is the same time necessarily, but the whole thing about after you've made that profound life change, everything has happened, everything is up and down, whatever, you're like reinventing yourself. But that first year, I think it is, you're not supposed to make any life-changing decisions. I think it's the same idea, to be honest. And I go back to the idea that each of us is dealing with this circumstance according to our natures, according to our experiences. Some people are great in the crisis. Other people are falling apart now. Others of us will fall apart later. There will be some people, it'll take them years to really be aware of the impact that this time has had on them, I think. But we are all collectively in flux. And I think that when the ground is shifting under your feet, and I don't know how it couldn't be at this time, given the onslaught from media, the changing news, the changing instructions, all the rest of it, I feel like when everything is that uneven, it's not the time to make fundamental decisions or, really important life decisions. I don't know that we're in a position to be able to clearly see where we are. I don't know that we have the scope of vision right now based on what is so right in front of us to make good choices. That being said, I did read that once they started lifting some of the quarantine rules and things in China, divorce rates went through the roof. So I do think that this might be a catalyst for those sorts of questions. right? Now, and to your point, Stephen, now might be the time to really start thinking about that stuff. And, we're used to distraction. We're used to keeping ourselves super busy so we don't have to think about those things. A lot of that distraction is gone. So now we kind of have to. So take that as an opportunity, I guess, right? In terms of reinventing yourself, that one's not as clear for me. This is how I see it. I feel, and this is for myself personally, I feel that right now we all have the opportunity to decide how we want to show up in the world. So, and you see it, right? You see it in some people have acted very selfishly. More people have acted with incredible generosity. I also think that if you dedicate some of your time to service right now, it's a great way to get through the day. It's a really good opportunity to get out of yourself a little bit, right? Like give yourself a bit of a break. So take a break from all those thoughts and things that are happening in your head. So I kind of this time is almost like we're in a crucible, right? There's a little pressure. And so how do you want to be? How do you want to act? Who do you really want to be? And who do you want to be moving forward? Because we do know that this time is going to end. We don't know when, but it will. So I do think that sort of the actions we choose now are going to inform potentially the kind of person we want to be moving forward. That's how I feel. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Oh, Daintree, I'm not to want to make changes. I know. But that's the thing. If you want to make changes, make them. Just don't feel compelled. That's the thing. I was talking to a client earlier today. She was on this great workout regimen and she's lost all her motivation. But when we actually sort of dissected it a little bit, it wasn't that was getting her to do it. It was willpower. And willpower and motivation are not the same thing. Willpower is when you force yourself to do something. Motivation is when you want to do it. And I would say in this time, answer what you want to do. Don't feel like you have to. Splitting hairs? Not really. I think it's a different thing. Wasn't sure. Ildiko, trying to upgrade skills now. Again, what are the skills that you're upgrading? And is it supportive? Do you enjoy doing it? Does it take you out of yourself? Does it help you pass some time in a constructive, supportive way? If you answer yes to those questions, then I say go for it. Absolutely. I think it's a great thing. Again, it comes down to, are you doing it out of fear? It might still be the right choice, but maybe some awareness around why you're doing it. I think the thing that I'm trying to do as much as possible is adding pressure to ourselves in what is already an incredibly stressful situation. So you'll know whether it's supportive to you or not. And I would say if it is, go for it. Absolutely. Just don't learn a language because you feel like a jerk if you don't. I don't think that's helpful. And Susan, I saw your comment. I had not thought of it in that light, and it's actually making me mentally go down a different road. I am super fascinated. What is the different road that you're going down? I'd love to know. So I hope that some of this is interesting or helpful. People ask me all the time for tips, right? Which makes sense. And everything in me wants to come up with this magic bullet and figure out the way to make everybody happy. I would love that. I would love that for myself, obviously. I think that that's not possible. And what I have found in clients as well as doing some of these webinars, I'm doing a whole series of support sessions for Volunteer Toronto, so for their volunteers. But there will also be one session that's open to the public coming up on the 23rd. I don't have the details yet, but I know that it's going to be April 23rd. So anybody who's done any volunteering, who's finding themselves in that situation moving forward, never really been there before, I think we're going to call it something like self-support for heroes. So the whole idea being that getting out there and being of service to other people is amazing and it's helpful and you feel good about yourself, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a bit of a sacrifice as well. And my point in all of that is that I think that a lot of us are trying really hard to make the best of this, to be optimistic, to do all the rest of that. And I think that's great. But, and I already said it, but I think it needs to be resaid, is this is a really hard time. And so acknowledging how hard it is. So don't feel compelled to buy spin on it. If you want to, fine. And sometimes that's really helpful. But remember to take the time and the space to if you need to do it by yourself, if you have someone you really love and feel safe with, do it with them. But just kind of commiserate. This is a crazy time that we are experiencing, and it's really hard, and there will be repercussions. And I think that just being honest with ourselves about how difficult it is takes some pressure off. So it's more about that, sort of like a release valve, so to speak, in terms of pressure. Susan, I was thinking of this as a singular event, and I hadn't thought how I'm reacting to it may have some roots in my past, but I can see that possibility. Yeah. There's a theory about grief. I don't know if it's specifically felt, but that's where I learned it anyway. But the theory about grief is that each loss brings back the experience of every loss you've ever felt, right? So all the losses that you've had in the past, every time you have a new one, it brings back all the rest as well, right? And when I say brings back, it means that obviously you're not in the past experiencing it, but the pain that you feel in the moment is as real in this moment as it was when you felt it the first time. So it's almost like it's sounded. And that's not exactly what we were talking about, but this connection between what we're feeling currently with how we felt in the past and having it all sort of come forward, I think. For me, the illustration of grief was the one that made the most sense. It was the most kind of visceral. I could see how that worked, and that's why sometimes, a relatively minor loss, it's a judgment call, but a relatively minor loss can feel so huge. And if you think that, through that one loss, you're reliving all the others that you've had in the past, it kind of makes sense, I think. Comment from Daintree. I guess we have to learn how to just be in this chaos until we are led to do whatever it is soul wants to do, but doing it from a place of wanting to create instead of out of fear. You said it beautifully. You said it way better than I did. So well done. But yeah, I think so. Stephen, do you have a theory to why everyone seems to be baking bread? Well, this is not scientific in any way. I think that we are craving comfort, because everything is so uncertain. Everything is so unsettled. Everything is up in the air. And yet you walk down, I think it's possible to walk through our lives and not think about it every second, but then it hits you, right? Like it hits you that we are actually in the middle of this crazy time. And I think there's something about bread, either it's the smell of it or the eating of it or the making or whatever, the creation of it, that feels really comfortable. That's what I think. Again, not an expert on bread, but that makes sense to me. Daintree, we all want something soothing. Absolutely. I think that's true. So that's a good question. I want to ask you guys, what do you do that's soothing? When you think of comfort, it just makes you feel good. What are some of the things that you do or rely on or create or whatever? I want to know. Is anyone baking bread? I can't bake bread, so I'm not doing that. But I have been cooking a lot, which is helpful because my child eats, so it keeps me busy. My parents lived through World War II, so my mind goes to worst case scenarios, money devaluing overnight, etc. I guess I worry about what's not happening. Yeah, that's a hard one. And I think it's normal that you should do that, or that you would do that. And I think that's what potentially is a lot of us up at 3:00 in the morning. We kind of hold it together during the day, but then somehow, at least in my case, 3:00 in the morning is when everything sounds so much worse or feels so much worse or whatever. So again, uncertainty, I think, is one of the hardest things for us to deal with. Absolutely. I think that a really practical way to keep that under control, if possible, is to really limit the amount of media you consume. This is not necessarily the place to get into, it's not about conspiracy theories or anything like that. But I do think that there is a particular slant on the way things are being reported. I think there's a lot of fear in the way things are being presented to us. Facts are being presented in certain ways. And so much of this is what I find, this is for me, what I find available to me through the media does not make me feel better. It only makes me feel worse. And it's exactly those sorts of things. Like 18 months from now, where will we be? Well, the reality is nobody knows. Nobody knows. I don't care who you are, what expertise you have to share. We've never heard it before, so we don't know. So if you can, back to one of our original points, if you can try to bring yourself back to the present when those thoughts come up, it may give you a bit of a break. Because if that happens, we'll collectively deal with it, but it hasn't happened yet. So that would be my suggestion. And I'm with you. I have definitely had that experience too, but bringing yourself back to now and dealing with what we have in place right now. I work with a lot of teenagers who catastrophize. I have one client who was graduating high school and he was just frozen fear because he'd already anticipated what life was going to be like when he was 40 years old, and he had a job he didn't really like that much, and he was in a marriage that wasn't we'd have to get divorced and how would that impact his, I mean, the kid was 17 years old and he was already living 20 years ahead. So we worked on that. We worked at, coming back to now because that could happen. It probably won't. Could. But we don't have control over any. We do have a little bit of control over stand. So I don't know if that's helpful. And then back to the soothing. There's a lot of food in here. I see the food. Eating a lot. Some of us do make bread. I mean, kudos, because I don't know how to do that. Oh, limiting news coverage. Yeah. I mean, if it's really important stuff, you're going to hear it. You're not going to miss out. Like, really getting focused in on all the minutia is probably not great. Okay. I'm glad that was helpful. And then taking pictures. That was from Robin. So is anybody doing creative stuff? And again, I don't mean, learning the Adobe Creative Suite from start to finish necessarily, but are there small creative things that people are doing to make themselves feel good? I want to start gardening. So I'm only 70 years old, but I would really like to do that. I think that would be helpful. If you're lucky enough to have a bit of outdoor space, I think that could be cool. But what I'm hearing in all of the things that people are commenting that are soothing for them, things that work, backyard sun therapy from the guy in Arizona. Thanks for that. But yes, absolutely. I think that the theme that I'm hearing in all of those things is that they're all present, right? If you're baking, you're baking bread in the moment. You're not actually doing anything else. That's what you're doing. And they're also, most of them, task-oriented, which I think is really interesting as well. And I've this come up with people. Starting and finishing something small, there's that sense of completion. For some of us, that feels really good, right? Again, back to my marathon metaphor or whatever. It feels in our dark moments, I think, like this is just going to go on forever. But we don't know when it's going to end. So if there are lessons that we can take and sort of take control of, do something that makes us feel good, and there is that sense of completion, I think that can be really helpful. Depends on the person, but I certainly relate to that. Oh, helpful and calming. Thank you, Daintree. That's a lovely comment. I'm going to take it. I feel so gratified by that. Thank you. And we get out of the house every day, realizing we are not housebound. This is from Susan. We walk in the woods or even around the neighborhood. Yes, absolutely. That is something that we are finding. So we're in Toronto, and we are finding that is easier or harder depending on where you live. Absolutely. If you live downtown, the chances aren't so great necessarily. But if you do have that, and I think I mentioned that earlier on, if you have any little area where you can sit in a lawn chair or something out on a patio, do that. I think that's really important. Oh, and make the snow go away. That's from our peeps in Calgary. Sorry about that. Yeah. Not ideal. I know. And what are the, I wonder what's going to happen. The weather changes. In some ways, that'll be really, really great. Here in Toronto, we've had a taste of the weather changing. But I think it may increase the squirreliness. I don't know how you guys feel about that. So I think then when that happens, just having a bit of outdoor space. I know that here in Toronto, they're talking about closing down some of the major roads, which is great because it's impossible to walk down the sidewalks and really social distancing because they're not big enough. But hopefully they'll do that. And even if they don't, there are definitely neighborhoods that you can go to, even if you live in a place where you don't have that space yourself. Maybe go to a neighborhood, walk down the middle of the street, whatever. But I think that getting outside is going to make a huge difference for people. Sitting inside in a sunbeam. Daintree, I envision you as this beautiful houseplant. But yeah, even in the areas, I think you're right. Tiny things. At least we're going into spring, which I think makes it easier for lots of us. So I have loved this. Thank you to everybody who's been part of this. I really appreciate it. My whole thought was that maybe I have some tips that I can share, but I have to be honest, hearing from each of you has been super supportive to me as well. It feels like a little unity, and I love that. So thank you. Thank you much. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm just thinking, does anybody have any other question, comment, anything that we haven't touched on? I feel like we've covered a lot, but there might be something is there a burning question that anybody has? that they want to share? Maybe not. And I think I might do it again, and this time on Zoom so we can talk. I like the talking. I'm just getting some nice comments from peeps. Very amazing. But again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed spending time with you guys. If anybody has any questions about anything else that comes up, let me know. As other people, if I don't have an answer to a question that you have, I'll do my best to up with someone who does. So I know a lot of really great people as well who have different perspectives on things. Anything I can do to help, you know, and stay tuned. I might do other stuff. And if there's something that we didn't, if it comes up with you later or occurs to you later, there's something that we didn't cover, let me know. And if you just want to stay in touch, that's awesome also. So I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And in there, everyone. Okay. I hope to talk to you. Thank you.